Welcome everybody. We are now looking at the third in the series of online events for European Humanity Plus. My name is David Wood. I'm a director on the board of Humanity Plus. And what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is just set the scene for today's discussion ahead of introducing the panel of transhumanists from around Europe who are assembled. So this is the third of the three meetings so far. The topic today is a very weighty one, a very serious one. Can technology bring us peace? We are well aware from every time we turn on the TV set or when we scan our Facebook news or any other means of getting news, there are lots of terrible things been happening this summer. There are outrages daily in, take some examples, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, Gaza, Israel, Russia, and Ukraine. But rather than diving into details of exactly who's to blame for all these things, we want to consider, is there a transhumanist response to these global flashpoints? After all, we transhumanists, we share the view that technology has the power to change many things. If we look at the human history, many things that have been very important to society have come about because of inventions such as the steam engine, electricity, the computer, washing machines, contraception, vaccinations, anesthetics, and so on. And it's also quite a common viewpoint within the transhumanist community that not only is technology changing everything, but the rate of pace of change of technology is increasing. So there is more likelihood that technology can influence what's happening. And certainly technology is changing war, in many cases making it more horrible. We can make it peace more feasible as well. And when I talk about technology, it's not just technology itself, it's all the kinds of innovative approaches that people can think of when they're in a technology mindset. If we look at what's changed around the world, technology enables changes, but then the actual changes draw back into all kinds of other motivations and other aspects of human psychology and sociology. So technology potentially has the ability to give us new perspectives on these global flashpoints. What are they? There's a couple of ground rules I've asked the panelists to follow today. First of all, we should aim to avoid getting bogged down picking sides in all these conflicts. So rather than say, he started it, no, they started it, well, it's all his fault over there, it's all her fault over there. We're going to try and transcend some of these discussions to find a bigger picture which is appropriate for a 21st century solution. I do personally believe there is a bigger picture here, which with our technology-focused, technoprogressive or transhumanist approach, we can see. And I'm very interested to find out how that discussion is going to unfold over the next 55 minutes to an hour or so. So that's what I would like to say to start off with. I've got a number of panelists online. A couple of other panelists haven't been able to join us yet because of various firewall or other logistics issues. We hope to see them soon. But I'm going to hand over now to transhumanists based like me in the UK, Amon Twyman. And Amon, I'd like you to share your thoughts on this topic to get us going.
Hi, David, thanks. Okay, well, I've got three thoughts generally. The first is that when we're talking about flashpoints, I was thinking the other day that it's important to think about what is a flashpoint for a start. Now, to my mind, a flashpoint is a trigger. It's like you know, a detonator doesn't matter if it's not connected to a bomb. So the deeper question is, what are these flashpoints triggering? And someone was asking me the other day, they were saying, well, I was saying to people, you know, what points of view might people like to see expressed in this panel? And one of the points that came back was, how could the transhumanist community miss all of the major problems that society is facing now and the big ones that are coming up in future? How could, as a subculture, we've been so oblivious? And I think, like a lot of people, I've always liked that transhumanism is very dynamic and optimistic and so on. But in some ways, I think it's optimistic to a fault. It's unbalanced in that whenever there's a pessimistic possibility, you know, that things could end very badly in one arena or another, or many of them, transhumanists have almost said over the last 20 years or so that by definition, that's not our problem. That we're interested in big sparkly starship future uploading outcomes, and all the other stuff is for other people to deal with. And frankly, I think if the people who are going to be the most visionary about thinking about where society could go, if they're not going to address bad things, then we've got some kind of unbalance. So, so I think flashpoints trigger underlying risks. The big picture for me is that there is no single class of underlying risk that is the king problem. I think the real problem is that risks like technologies converge, and they make each other, as risks become bigger and bigger and bigger, they make each other more likely. So resource shortages make the risk of war more likely, or environmental damage can lead to greater civil discord, which can increase unequal distribution of resources and so on. So you get this kind of knock-on effects. As for answers, the third thing is that I think there are a lot of different technologies coming online all the time. I do believe that we're seeing accelerated development of technology, as many transhumanists, singularitarians would expect. And we can't predict what technologies are going to do, what each individual technology is going to do. But what we could predict, and what we are seeing already, is a lot of disruption and decentralization. Now that can be a dangerous thing, because we don't know the outcomes when you take a situation where you've got a few known players and then you disrupt their ability to control the game, and you decentralize things, and you've got lots of other players suddenly involved, lots of individuals empowered by the technology they're using. But I think one thing we can focus on that's potentially good, at least, is that there are some problems that are made worse when there are only a handful of players who have any kind of serious control over the situation, certain large companies and governments, and when they've got agendas that don't take snowballing risks seriously, it's a good thing to disrupt and minimize the amount of power they've got over the situation, to try and democratize these dangerous situations through technology. Sorry, I've got a little advisor coming here, so I'm going to have to chat to him for a moment. But that's my three thoughts basically. So flashpoints are triggers; they trigger underlying converging risks, and that if there's one useful thing that transhumanists can be thinking about in order to try and minimize those risks, it's how disruptive technologies can lead to a democratization or decentralization to try and diffuse some of these problems.
Right. Well, many thanks, Amon. If you need to attend to something, you can hide. You can turn off your camera. If you, otherwise, the world will be watching your parenting skills.
I will. I will be back in one moment.
That's right. So I'd like to turn now to Marc Roux. Marc, who is currently in Greece, but is very active inside the AFT, the French transhumanist organization. Marc, what's your opening thoughts on this? And maybe you can build on some of the thoughts that you've already heard from Amon.
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that my English, it's not so many on there is. For example, I absolutely don't know if I can say this expression like that, and I am sorry if I'm not every time very understandable. So I hope that you will be comprehensive. Well, if I try to say one point for me is that for all that thing, that's for the way we are discussing tonight, there is a main and big problem, and it is what someone like Julian Savulescu in Oxford Future of Humanity Institute is discussing, is the fact that at the origin of at the roots of all these wars or problems of identities, etc. I'm afraid that there is something that it is in a very human nature what we call, or what they call, human nature. That's mean how the man born at that time, and it's something that's probably come from a very far. Julian Savulescu argued that we are mainly exactly the same that we was at least 40,000 years ago, and for the social relations we are working on the same model. And one of his hypotheses is that we are unable, fundamentally unable, to feel some compassion for someone who is out of our near circle, out of our family or the clan. Maybe it's the more far we can feel compassion. But even the next region is something absolutely etheric. We can't feel very well, or we can have compassion with the peoples which are so far. Even today, with the technologies, the broadcasting, etc., the possibility to have some relations with someone with it on the other side of the planet. This is something different to see you tonight. I'm sorry, and to see, and for Amon to see his son in his kitchen. So that is an example. There is a second hypothesis which go in the same direction, and well, I will say just a word now, and maybe I can come back to this point later. It is what, for example, a French psychanalyst in the 17th and in the 16th and the 17th called dominance. Here's Henri Laborie, for example, but his research was used by others. Henri Laborie was explaining that in our very nature, because we are aware of our death, at the moment that we are in a determinate place, a small place or larger, but that we see borders, limits. We have the impression that we can't go away from this place. So at this moment we are afraid, and we are starting to develop anguish and stress, and to go to the past, to flood this anguish. There is three possibilities. Or you have to be the dominant one, and you have to keep to be the leader, or you have to follow the leader, or you have to be the victim. And he met a lot of experiences with peoples and with animals to show that we can find the same attitudes in the animal reign in the mammals, but also with the humans. And this fact, you can find it in different scales. And for example, the fact to be in countries with limited resources could have the same kinds of consequences for all a population which is suffering about a lack of water, etc. All the problems you was talking about in introductions. So at this point, I think that transhumanism can propose some ideas and even solutions. And in my point of view, in general, it's called moral enhancement.
Moral enhancement. But how quickly can moral enhancement take place? I mean, I am very sympathetic to what Julian Savulescu of Oxford and Ingmar Persson of Gothenburg wrote, and you mentioned them earlier, that our current world problems arise because of many things that we didn't evolve to be able to deal with. We evolved to be able to deal with small groups. We evolved to think in short term. And the kinds of natural paleolithical reactions that we tend to have serve us very badly in the modern world. So how long will it take to get all the various people morally enhanced? Is that a credible solution? Or that's, I guess, the question.
Yeah, it's clear. It's quite clear, I think, that at this time there is not such a kind of solution. There is such kind of direction, and to have a proposition, we have to make fantastic progress about the comprehension of the brain, and so there is a lot of steps before to propose such a direction. But in the same way, it seems so clear, that we can go faster or lower into these directions, and it depends a lot about how many money we are to expend on those directions. And so, for example, I was very happy to see that the choice of the European Union last year's was to choose the Human Brain Project as the first project for the next 10 years. I think that is very, very important, and a lot of solutions came from this. But for the while, I'm afraid, and for a long time, the solutions we have in our hand is still education.
Okay. So many thanks for that intro, Mark. That's very useful. We might imagine that the European Brain Project, another brain project. You still see it?
I have a problem with my laptop. Just a while.
That's all right. But I'll just summarize what I was going to say. I think we have a positive vision, perhaps, that the research that's going on inside the human brain, inside human motivation, inside human psychology, might accelerate with more resources being applied in this. It's not going to have an overnight success, but perhaps within 10, 20 years, we will understand much more the roots of human enmity, the roots of alienation, the roots of anger and bitterness, and all the things that lead us to conflict. And then we might be able to put the right kind of drug in the water, just like chlorine stops our teeth decaying, or fluoride rather. Fluoride stops our teeth decaying. Better be sure we get the right drug. Then potentially there's scope for going faster than what education can do currently. Education does a lot. In Julian Savulescu's book that he co-wrote with the other person I mentioned earlier, Ingmar Persson, they say, yeah, education is absolutely critical, but there could be more that could be accomplished. So that's very interesting. Let me turn to the third of today's panelists in a moment, Khannea. Let me also say quickly that the audience members can click on the Q&A button at the top right of their screen, and they can ask questions if you are struck by anything you've heard and you'd like the panelists to come and look at that. So far, we don't have any questions submitted, as far as I can see, but I'm expecting some will come in soon. So, Khannea, you are based in The Hague in the Netherlands. I don't think you would fall under the description I had from Amon earlier, that transhumanists tend to be too much optimistic and ignore all the kinds of messy issues of the real world. One reason you're here is because I know from your writings you don't. So what's your take on what you've heard so far on this subject area?
As for moral enhancement, I think moral enhancement is more followed in the form of a dialogue and an interactive process. And right now, the media that are emerging in the world are a form of moral enhancement. If you're able to see completely shredded children in the Gaza Strip, you are left compelled to come up with a moral response. And there is also, well, clearly there is a debate in this regard. There's groups in the world that try to sway the functionality of the new media and internet and whatever new media might emerge in the next few years as to us to become more moral humans, so moral enhancement, if you will. There are voices on the right, and I wouldn't call them evil, but the Koch brothers clearly qualify in some regard. So you might call the Koch brothers detractors in the moral enhancement arena. But clearly there are also encouraging developments. If you look at what internet and what mobile phones and what all those technologies are doing right now, and if you project forward just 10 years compared to 10 years in the past, I think that's encouraging. So I have high hopes for emerging media, communications technologies, and whatever, especially immersion. So virtual reality is a good one for me. Point two, I think that technology right now in 2014 is not that functionally different from the technology in the Second World War. We make the same stupid mistakes of human beings. If you call them mistakes, I might even think they're intentional. We do the same conflict resolution. We do the same smearing, slandering, demonization. We are still engaged in genocides and ethnic cleansings. We still struggle for exactly the same resources as in the Second World War. Second World War was about oil in large part, and right now what's happening, for instance, in the Ukraine is clearly petrochemical, an extension of petrochemical needs of the West. So right now the technology is still in a state where things are more or less predictable, but that's going to change very quickly. So the technology emerging in the next 10 or 15 years will be decisive one way or the other. Point three, I think that transhumanists don't make any difference. I think it's a hobby. I think it's a sort of a narrative engagement we are all engaged with. Transhumanism doesn't make much of a difference, with a few exceptions, maybe at the Future of Humanity Institute or at Google or whatever. But I think the grassroots transhumanist movement is nothing more than a science fiction club at this stage. If we want to discuss solutions, I think we should look at the solutions in terms of energy depletion. The one thing that guarantees, absolutely guarantees, people behaving nice is plenty economic growth, and the only thing that guarantees economic growth is access to cheap, easily replaced and non-polluting resources. I wouldn't even want to start about climate change, but there are only three solutions in view, and that's fusion. Thorium is an extension of that. Ultra-cheap photovoltaics or space-based solar, but all three have like short-term enormous problems. So I think we're, especially paired with the absurd population levels in the world, we are almost guaranteed to go for a horrible era in human existence in the next few decades. And like I said, there's almost nothing transhumanists at this stage can do about it. Now, regarding point four, I can be very brief about it. We have nothing to expect from politicians. Politicians are lost. I don't see them offering any solutions. Even worse, most politicians' statements right now are leading us into a horrible future. So, summarizing, no more business as usual. We stand towards a nexus point where things can either go unspeakably, horrifically, Mad Max levels bad, or if technology, well, comes up with curveballs, we might, as a human species, slowly move towards a better outcome. But, well, I wouldn't want to live in the third or developing world right now.
So what are you recommending? I mean, you said that we transhumanists, we're hobbyists, you know. Most of us, we sort of dabble a little bit here and there, mainly dabble in technology, and we don't like to get involved in real-world messy stuff. So what would you suggest that we do?
Energy resources. If we as transhumanists can advocate energy resources and put our shoulders behind that, my personal preference is moving away from petrochemicals, but good luck with that. Thorium is an interesting one, although opinions are not very consistent on this. I have personally great expectations, but definitely long-term expectations for space-based solar. And I think the only thing that keeps society together is a mix of wind turbines and photovoltaics at this stage. And like our standards of living are gone in 10 years or 20 years from now. Our Western standard of living are definitely gone. That's my firm conviction. But if we, as transhumanists, want society to meaningfully survive, it's definitely, we need a lot more energy resources. And that's boot on the ground, where the rubber meets the road. It's not sexy. It's not like all the things that transhumanists are generally upbeat about, but it's survival at this stage.
Right. Well, there's lots more to discuss there, but before we get into that follow-on discussion, I'd like to introduce the fourth member of the panel, Andrius Kasparavicius, who originally is from Lithuania, but has been in the UK for a number of years. So, Andreas, I know that you also take the subject of peace very seriously. You're not interested just in dabbling in technology, although as a person from IT, as I am, we are excited and interested in technology, but there are more important things in technology. So what's your view on some of what you've heard already, and what would you like to advocate?
Hi. First, I'd like slightly to disagree probably with Khannea. While I agree that resources issue is incredibly important nowadays, however, I think it's an relative factor, because we always will want more. You know, if we have more resources, as humans, we'll want more always, and you know, the fight over those resources will probably stay the same. And I think as transhumanists are actually quite a lot related, I think, to humanism societies and movement, which actually has been fighting against, I think, religious prejudices and secular humanism, especially. And they were doing this education to help their society change. And I think we, as transhumanists, hobbyists even, we should do something first by, I think, talking a bit more about this future, which we actually talking about immortality, talking about the amazing future we'll live long and happily, but ignoring the really massive facts, those wars, which can actually stop us living fairly soon. And I think if we read like Kurzweil's book about long enough to live forever, and then Three Bridges, and I'm not sure if he mentions somehow that we need to address current wars in order to have one, to go through one of those bridges, because if some rocket or terrorist attacks or anything happens now, all this talk about immortality and future is just gone pretty much. So I think it's quite symbolic that we're talking this today about the peace, as we have NATO summit happening in UK in Wales this week, and there are lots of protests, etc. And I think what we should do is to start maybe some tradition around talking innovation on peace solutions, I think, because if you look, I think I quite agree with Khannea on saying that politics hasn't changed really. I think there's pretty much no innovation, seriously, happening. And if we look at the recent Ukraine's and Russia's conflict, we saw that Richard Branson, the fairly known businessman, is going to those guys and doing diplomacy, pretty much. So what does it say about diplomats who actually should be at forefront and innovating new ways of doing politics, basically, as we saw innovation in wars, actually. We saw hybrid wars, which are happening in Ukraine now, and Northern Africa, mentioning which actually, they're fighting over let's say, oil now, but you know, those countries are rich in solar energy as well. So, you know, even if we go to solar energy, it might not change the resource conflict. So
because we have much more energy now than we had in the past, and there was conflicts over resources in the past. In principle, we've got enough resources to keep everybody in the world happy compared to previous expectations, but still we have conflicts.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk about innovation. I think, yeah, first thing is that I think we should take our, in a way, responsibilities. You know, if we try to consider hobbies, even, you know, to discuss time to time, discuss about yeah, peace innovations, and we know with lots of different communities, with so many startups which happening in many different areas. I think politics is still struggling. You know, we got innovations in health, I think, coming many, and I think that innovations in politics and will have to come, especially as I mentioned previously, all those ideas of meta governments, or you know, pirate parties. They do liquid feedback decision-making systems for crowdsourced politics, pretty much. And I'm sure that something will develop from those projects anyway, because you know, conflict starts where you don't have agreement on different ideas, different things, and I truly believe in a sort of a grand unified theory of everything. And I'm sure, you know, if we look through education at anything, you know, I'm sure we can find that we pretty much talk about the same things, and we want the same things, because, you know, stardust to stardust and ashes to ashes actually has a very powerful meaning. You know, we are the same. We carry same dying dead sun's elements, and we share same genetic code, and so on and so on. So we are ignorant in a way on many aspects, because I think it's too difficult. There are too many things to handle, and I think once we have innovation in different augmented politics systems, the ones like mentioned in metagovernments.org project. I'm not related to that project, but, you know, I'm quite interested, and we have in Lithuania a similar project running as experimental. I'm sure as it will be easier to participate in political system, it's going to be probably less conflicts, because you will realize why things are happening the way they are. You know, how to respect where one's freedoms ends, whereas others starts, and so on and so on. So I think all those things will get clarified better, and we will have maybe less prejudice in the future, and more clarity about why things are happening that way, and we'll accept them as normal rather than unfair, and therefore will not maybe start wars.
Andreas, many thanks for all these ideas. What I want to do is have another round of comments from all the panelists, and then we'll dip into some of the questions that are gradually coming from the audience members. But what I'd like to focus on in this round, well, you can make any comments that you wish, but in particular, there's the proposal that we could have peace innovations, through changes in how government works or how people can participate in democracy. Several of you have mentioned that. So are you suggesting that if countries such as Russia, Ukraine, Syria, also Israel and Palestine, if the civilians there had a different form of democracy to express their views, then there would be less likelihood of war? So that's one thing to explore. And the other thing is, I'd like to follow on with this idea of moral enhancement, and how credible is it that moral enhancement might work, and who will decide what moral enhancement is? Because after all, somebody may say, no, I don't want people to become more docile, you know, or I don't want people to become more self-assertive, or whatever. So how can we make progress with moral enhancement? So I'm going to go around the panelists in the same order as before, a couple of minutes each, and then we'll, as I said, look into questions from the audience. Amon.
Okay. Right. So I think I'd just like to start with the things that Marc said about moral enhancement. It strikes me, and this relates to the idea of spreading different types of democracy or anything else, really. I think it's kind of recursive in that, I mean, I think it's a noble idea, don't get me wrong, but I think it's inherently recursive because the idea, you'll have a certain set of ideas about what kind of behaviors or moral parameters you're enhancing. And different societies and different factions with different ideologies are going to have very different ideas about what it is you want to enhance. Like, for example, I mean, it's a cartoonish example, but a very topical one. What are the members of ISIL going to make of Western versions of moral enhancement? They're probably going to decide that it's an abomination. And quid pro quo, anyone say that we were told, oh, there's a new moral enhancement technology on the market, and it's approved by ISIL. So we're going to say, well, we don't actually see that as moral, so it's all rather recursive. I think the technology is a tool, and it reflects the predilections of the people who develop the tool. So there's a bit of a chicken-egg issue there. Doesn't mean we can solve it, but there's an issue to address.
Well, but let me feed in straight away a question I see from Miriam Lees, who is saying that actually there is a solution to here. It's we should be focusing more effectively on promoting rationality. And she also suggests focusing on fostering secularism. So if there was more emphasis on rationality, then perhaps that would be the basis in which moral enhancement could flourish.
Well, okay, so just to continue with that line of thought, I do think we would get a lot of mileage out of that. I do agree. But rationality, I don't think is the all-conquering panacea that a lot of people seem to think it is. Like, for example, rationality is about optimizing arguments to minimize things like bias and error, miscommunication, that kind of thing. But if your rational arguments start on an axiom, you've got some kind of set of assumptions, a foundation that you're launching off from, that somebody else fundamentally disagrees with, then no amount of rationality in the world is going to help the two of you meet. You'll come to different conclusions because you started with different understandings of the world to begin with. Now, admittedly, if you've got two, for argument's sake, if you've got two groups of people or two people who have got fairly similar worldviews, they would like to cooperate if they could, and they're both being rational, then yeah, great. I think that would help. But I think if they've got very different worldviews or their ultimate aims are fundamentally mismatched, then no amount of rationality is going to diffuse things. It's just going to clarify how much they need to try to kill each other. This takes me to what Andrius was saying, that I really like the idea. I really hope you're right, Andrius. I really like the idea that as we go, sort of emergent rationality and tools, these kind of things, it'll all lead to sort of a coming together. The people will sort of realize that, our differences were part of our civilizational immaturity, and then we'll have a big group hug and everything will end happily ever after. I don't see it. The reason I don't see that is I think some of our bigger conflicts are based more on resource issues in the deepest possible sense, in the sense that flies and spiders have differences of opinion about resources. The spider decides that the fly is a resource. Sometimes, like for example, without picking sides, this business in Ukraine, I think there are major powers at play who don't want a happy, peaceful agreement. This is not a miscommunication that's happening in Ukraine. It is opposing sets of desired outcomes. So unless all parties came to the table saying, we believe that we could all rejigger our goals a little bit to come to an outcome that makes us all happy, and then they're all happy to submit to sort of rules that would encourage rationality in the negotiation, then unless you can do that, and that's a big ask, unless you can do that, then I don't think there's much of a hope, because it turns into power politics. Just the last thing is Khannea's got a very I know Khannea's point of view very well. I agree with it in many ways, except that I'm not quite as pessimistic as Khannea is. I tend to think the possibility of bad outcomes over any given period is sort of a probabilistic thing. Like terrible stuff could happen tomorrow, but it's highly unlikely. But as time goes on, I think the likelihood of terrible things happening gets higher and higher and higher, unless there are massive, massive changes. And Khannea seems to put the kind of the likelihood of, you know, everything going south, that probability goes to about 1 in about 10 years' time. I would okay, okay, I'm not sure, but I would say that unless there are serious global changes, I would say we're going to have serious problems inside the next 40 years. But I don't know quite how soon. It's, you know, I don't think anyone can know.
Okay, well, Amon, we can discuss the probabilities in a minute. And Khannea has suggested it's 50% likely we'll have a major collapse, a terrible collapse within 20 years. That's probably what I would say roughly as well. The more important thing than discussing the probabilities is discussing how we could change these probabilities and make that 50% go down. But let's move on to Marc. Marc, you've been listening carefully to the conversation. Your English was very good last time, I have to say, so no need to worry on that front. What would you like to say now?
Well, I can try to rebound on the two main directions I heard about. The different ideas came from Andrius and then this theme about the moral enhancement. Yes, I agree that in a short term, some ideas like meta-government issues, everything that can go over the politician way of make politics for the while could be good. In the long term, certainly we will have to have some morally enhanced politician. It could be a solution in the long term. But in general, what it's an idea it's to go over the boundaries, because politicians, for the while, the 95% of politicians are national politicians with national or private interest. And when they look for solution, they look for a national solution with national interest. I think that just like a meta-government have to go over the boundaries, and everything that permits the communication of the boundaries can be a good things. Like, for example, what actually is in development. I think you, David, was talking in your presentation about the massive online open courses, which give the possibility for people all over the world to get an access to every knowledge. I think that it is a very good way. In general, every intercultural exchange, it's a good direction. For example, one thing that maybe Europe, I mean European Union made, and I think it's very, very good things, it's the Erasmus program, which permits the students to travel and discover for enough months other countries on the continent. And from now, millions of students have experienced this possibility, and I think that it plays a role in the fact that in the European countries, it is now quite much difficult to imagine what happened now between Ukraine and Russia. I'm afraid that during all the Soviet periods, maybe the exchange wasn't in the same way. I'm afraid that the exchange was of imperialistic type. That is to say, everything directed toward the center, the capital. That's mean toward Russia. And well, maybe I'm talking about the things I don't know enough. But in general, I think that the general and the main problems is always identity and boundaries. If we are still thinking in this way of thinking, that means we are in some boundaries. We encounter the problem I was talking about. That means that there is limits, and so there is anguish. We have we fear the fact that we will reach these boundaries, and at the time we will have problems. And I think that these problems, it's not the problem of Syria or Iraq or Ukraine nowadays. I think that this is a problems which all human communities encounters in all their history. Well, we have to find some solution in a short term, sure. But if we don't deblock some inner boundaries, I'm afraid that we will ever find in front of us such conflicts. So I come back to the second point, which is the idea of moral enhancement. First, to answer to Miriam, who was talking about rationality. I think that it's not enough. For example, the 19th century was the great great century of rationality, of positivism, for example. And after 1 century of development of the positive ideology, we get First and Second World War. I mean that the fact is, human in his actual natural aspect is not really rational. I'm just thinking that our irrational part, it's maybe something like 90% of the way we are functioning. Actually, at the moment I'm talking to you, I'm full of different things which are not at all rational. My own anguish with the language. The warmth of Greece which imposes me to have a ventilator on my head. I don't know what. And there's a few rational things which I try to say. I think that first of all we have to be able to work on this rationality. And so now I want to answer to something that Amon say. Sure, if we are talking about only about moral, I suppose that we never get any consensus about what have to be a moral enhancement. But maybe. Can we agree about what make us dominant, for example? And an hypothesis is the fact that we have certain capability of aggressivity. The question is where it comes from. I suppose, even if I'm not at all a specialist in such a question, that it is our capacity to resist, to survive in a context which was the context of prehistoric time. I have to be able to run very quickly. If there is a tiger which is running after me, and so I need fear. Because the fear is going to give me this rapidity. I have to be able to defend my family if the same tiger came again, because he's very angry and is come from my cave, and I have to be able to have enough aggressivity to use a weapon and to fight it.
So the same emotions are coming up in today's modern conflicts. That people are viewing
exactly.
each other as tigers, and they're willing to fight to defend their children and their womenfolk and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And the moral enhancement program could allow rationality to dominate, and we'd realize more rationally, hey, these people aren't tigers, they're actually flesh and blood like us, and we've got a common vision of how we should be.
Rationality can arrive at the end, more rationality.
Yeah.
I think that we have to understand what makes us enough aggressive, but I'm sorry. I think that the conditions, the context is extremely different today, and the fact that the society now, if you use this capacity of aggressivity in today's society, you are a murderer. 40,000 years before, you were surviving. Yes, we have to find and to be able to change with a teeny way what have to be changed, because it's very, very. I'd say that the problems after that is the question of liberty. If I'm going to changing myself at this point, in which way am I still free? And it's other questions. But I stop.
Okay. Well, what I would like to briefly cover, Marc, is I know that you, in your educational desires, you are organizing a conference, which is a Europe-wide conference, which is going to be in Paris in a few months' time. And maybe we could briefly talk through this program. And we don't have much time, so it is going to have to be very brief. But I'm showing some of the slides, if I've got this right, from your conference now. So. Okay.
Thank you very much, David, for this little break. So yes, it is important for transhumanism in France that we will have the opportunity in next November to organize this symposium, which will be the first transition in France. And to have in Paris some of the persons which play an important role in the history of transhumanism and today transhumanist thought. So yes, you can show these slides, which is showing just a part of the participants. We will have something like 20 with 25 participants in these symposiums. They will present our conferences or be present just for round table about a lot of themes. But another.
Will they all be speaking in French?
No, even if a major part we will speak in French, but as you can see on these pictures, you have people, some Amon, which is with us tonight. Hi, Amon. And you can see also Natasha Vita-Moore or James Hughes or Aubrey de Grey, which all are English-speaking. But hopefully we will have possibility for translations. I have to get a confirmation for these points, but we are ready to make the effort to pay some translators, and for the few participants which will be English speaking, we have to get translations. So I hope that it will be more helpful for everybody. Yes, in this slide you can see that, well, if you go to the main site, which is no, that is the site, the prevent, the first you showed, this one, yes, first, thanks. This is the main site of the event, so it's just transvision2014.org. You will see the presentation of the event, and well, the button you see, it's in English, but I think that for the main information it's okay. We'll still waiting for a good translation for the sites. I hope that it will come. In a few days, the register button will be open. For the while, it's not launched, but it's a question of days, because just in parallel we are fixing the program, the programmation, and it's just a question of days now. We will send the information. We will spread the information that the registration will be open immediately. So that's for the technical points. But I want to say that we want this this time for Transvision. We want two things. First of all, we choose a central theme, an axial theme, which will be transhumanism facing the social question, because we thought that for the while and worldwide maybe there is not a lot of conferences of which are speaking about transhumanism in general, and who discuss about the questions of the social consequences. And it's much more important.
A bit similar to what we're doing in this call today. In fact, we're looking at some of the social consequences.
Yes, absolutely, yes. But the fact is that we think that in France, this is a point which is especially, I'd say that we are very sensitive to these points. And I have to say that for the while, transhumanism don't pass at all very well in France. For a while, we are still at I'd say that the moment where transhumanism is seen like a very weird things, and the most reactions is rejection. So we are thinking about the way to make the movement of ideas understandable in France, and we thought that it could be a way, it could be a door to open to the French thinkers. And the second point is that, but it's joined with the first, is that Transvision 2014 won't be 100% transhumanistic conference symposium. It will be more open than that to general critics, and we will have between our stakeholders, we will have some really critics of transhumanism, and so you have to be aware that it won't be one-side symposium. In the same way, we have a search and find some partners for the organization, and as one of the partners is a very academistic partner, so it obliges us to preserve a balance between the different stakeholders. Because I remember that the previous transvision was much more real transhumanistic events.
Well, we want to have a proper dialogue with the rest of the world. We have to engage them in their opposition to transhumanism. So long as they are open-minded and so long as they are willing to understand our point of view too, we should have a great discussion.
I hope so, and that is the point. And last thing maybe to say, it's a message toward David Wood, if you know. Because David, I had just got an answer just some few hours before the beginning of this discussion tonight, and so now I can say that you have a really good possibility to be with the different participants in the event.
Whether or not I have a chance to speak there, I will certainly be present, and I hope that at least some of it will be in schoolboy English or in schoolboy French or in English, so I can participate.
Okay, I very think that it's something like 75% sure now.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Mark. I think what we're trying to do, both you and I and the others on the call, we're trying to engage a wider conversation about the relevance of transhumanism to real social issues such as peace, inequality, future well-being. So not just gadgetry, not just personal health, but social health too. Thanks very much. Let's continue the second round of the comments from the panelists. We're getting into meaty topics, so there's a lot to say, but I'm going to ask everybody to try and slightly speed up. I know, Khannea, you can't actually stay much longer. You've got some other family commitment. But what's your take on what we've been talking about?
Thank you very much for my part tonight.
Thank you.
Returning to the question of Miriam, is it possible if we would generally be more actively foster secularism and rationality? I think for fostering secularity and rationalism, transhumanism as a movement is a little bit on the small side. I do not believe in moral enhancement as some kind of add-on chip or a software program or some kind of mimetic technology or maybe even a blue nanotechnology fluid. I think that we are very far removed from that kind of interventions, even if they were desirable. I would label moral enhancement an euphemism for moral programming, and moral programming is, as Amon clearly demonstrates, is undesirable for everybody else but me. If I would be able to dictate the pretext for moral programming, the world would be very happy, but nobody would consent to my particular flavor or taste or preference in this regard. I can give you a more practical result, and I'm hoping not too cynical in this, but I give you more practical of moral programming. If we can get the World Bank or the World Trade Organization or whoever to come up with microcredits to women in the third world, this is a proven form of moral programming. The women have less children, which might be argued as desirable. They raise those children in a definitely different manner. They get raped less. They are less traumatized. They immediately start businesses. They become more feminist and more organized in the community, and definitely the quality of the communities immediately improves. This is a moral improvement, and this is something that is embedded in the real world. And I can give you, if you give me a week time to come up with the examples, but I give you dozens of examples of real, what was the financial plan of the America that after World War II?
The New Deal.
Well, no, it was just...
no, the Marshall Plan.
Yeah, the Marshall Plan is an example of moral programming. You teach people to be nice because you give them money. People who have money, have resources, and have good food are generally nice and moral human beings.
So this ties into the question that Martin Dinoff has raised. I mean, he also picking on this. How can we more quickly and effectively bring more self-consistent and rationally inspired transhumanist ideas to younger school children today, before they form religionist, nationality, atavistic core belief systems in their mind?
Well, a good example of a technology that would immediately be effective in this regard is feed them. If you go to America and you feed particularly black children a school lunch, they're much more likely to grow up as well-developed, grounded, and moral human beings. So it's money. Show me the money.
Thanks. Andreas.
Yeah, I heard comments about that, the crowdsourced politics or the different feedback systems not likely would work because there would still be politics power games. However, in this case, if you open up the politics and you make it public, more public, because decision making would have to be more public if it's crowdsourced, hiding all those power games and swaps of benefits, etc., etc., it would be much harder, and then rationality would, be opened up as well. So you would could question this rationality more because you would know more about what is exactly happening. Because now there are lots of conflicts because in this whole chain of commands we have so many single points of failure basically, and we cannot communicate at different levels, and we cannot influence and do not know lots of information about decision making and what is happening. So yeah, crowdsourced and the improvements in politics would have to come with opening up and removing single points of failure. It means that if the very top heads, the elite of politics, have some sort of agreements, or whether for the good or for the bad, that means that those who are electing would be able to maybe block or have a different approaches if they honestly would be able to make decisions on their lives and what is happening in large groups, and peer review their thoughts and match that to the bigger picture. And coming back to this idea of the moral enhancement, yeah, it can be probably like even a moral enhancement race, some sort of, where you would question whether that is a social construct or whether that is some fundamental universe derivative, which I think we should focus more. We need to look at the fundamentals of this universe and then find derivatives from that, deriving theories and practices which then support our reasoning and allow us to create some sort of moral standards. Because if we just create some moral standards, and that would be questionable in itself whether that is right, I sort of would like to go maybe back to see what's out there. And I think it's not only for humans. We saw this interesting Transcendence film recently, where all lots of questions, I think, discussed and opened up to the public, but I think public was not quite interested in that film, as far as I understand, and therefore, we are still not starting the dialogue of what is going to happen in the near future, because there will be some, terrorists who will try to stop that happening, and whether that is right or wrong, we need to start discussing openly now, and that probably should come together with some sort of, all those wars, etc. also probably start because no one is keeping the international law, which in most cases are developed by the United Nations, and we have the dilemmas of the killer robots now, and what will happen with the AI? Will there be AI wars? Will AI have weapons of mass destructions? And will we matter as humans? If we'll decide to take it slow, not to embrace AI as soon as possible, will that mean that we will, will be lost somewhere in translation, pretty much? So at the same time, you will need to find a ways to reconcile the current wars, because without reconciliation, probably tit for tat, and it's probably we have quite a few flashpoints probably globally where conflict has been going for quite a long time, and there is some sort of race, who will do more in revenge of some previous attacks, etc., etc. So we need to find ways to reconcile as well. And whether we'll go into space or anywhere, I think, or we'll upload to computers, the very fundamental reason of conflict is here and everywhere. And I'm questioning and would like also to, in the future, to see topics on this matter, how fundamentally we can find root causes and root principles of how to manage those conflicts wherever they are going to be, and we will have more. I know if those conflicts are small now, and they were smaller before, and if we extrapolate from trends again, as we do in hobbies, futurists and transhumanists, we see the trends of globalization and improvement of technology and power of those technologies probably will have much more dangerous conflicts in the future.
I think that is potentially the big takeaway from this discussion. One part of the takeaway is it's pretty depressing. We're coming up with a few positive thoughts. Everybody has made some suggestions, and I think they're positive. They are valid, but I'm hearing more problems than issues, and I'm hearing also the problems are likely to get worse. I think this is our transhumanist response to some of these global flashpoints. It is, you ain't seen nothing yet. The kind of issues that are escalating with people beheading others and they're putting their video onto YouTube and it being seen all around the world is just a small example of how technology will actually magnify problems rather than just to magnify solutions. So the fact that there's no ready cut and dried solution shouldn't deter us from saying, hey, come on, out the world, look at this. There are big issues ahead. Here are some potential solutions. Let's discuss them very seriously. Let's put more effort into this rather than into some of the other stuff that tends to occupy people's minds. We are running out of time, I'm afraid. I know that Khannea has to leave in about 2 minutes. I'm going to have one quick round of comments, maybe 2 minutes most from everybody, and we'll start with Khannea. When you are free to dip into the fascinating set of questions that have been raised by audience members, if you click on that Q&A button, panelists, at the side of your screen, you'll see what's been there. And I would encourage you to, the questions you pick, try and pick the ones that have got more plus ones beside them rather than the others. So, Khannea, what's your final comments on all these topics?
I would love it if there was some kind of collaboration, purposeful collaboration in the transhuman organization. I think that if we set a very simple, falsifiable goal, we can achieve quite a bit. But I might say we have to get our hands dirty a little, and everyone can feel whatever you mean, make your own interpretation what you mean, but you might have to cheat or use trickery or use hacking or use other methods. But transhumanism is a small movement. It is a very, very resourceful movement. But if we say our goals reasonable, I think we can achieve quite a bit.
Well, maybe we can have a discussion another day on what that simple goal should be. I mean, you have suggested working on energy. Others have got other ideas on what that simple goal should be. Thanks, Khannea. Amon.
Thanks. Well, I see the top Q&A question is about investing in energy and resource technologies. And I agree that should really be the number one, well, resources generally should be the number one priority, partly because it could diffuse a lot of conflicts, partly because it could head off various categories of collapse that Khannea mentioned if we had a lot more energy. And also partly whatever radical technological paradigm shifts that might come out of the woodwork, if they've got a lot of energy to draw upon, they could have a greater chance of being game changers. I'd say, if you go through sort of extreme transhumanist scenarios, you're talking about uploading and getting off planet. I see a couple of other comments sort of along the lines of what are the chances that we could get people into safe locations, not keep all of humanity's eggs in one basket. I think having access to a lot of energy, abundant energy, would make all of that a lot more likely.
But the comment there in that particular question is ideology is still going to remain, and even though there is more energy, there will be ideology which causes us to do bad things with that energy. And there's a related question from Michael Hrenka, who says again, let's say, lost that question. It was here a minute ago on the list. Yeah, here it is. We can argue that worldviews are not actually rational. If we get more rationality, maybe we could see that some of these ideologies, which currently command lots of attention, maybe they would lose their appeal, because everybody would say, "Oh, well, actually, now that we're thinking about it, of course we're not going to believe in X, Y, Z."
I don't think there's a lot of evidence that people do that historically. So we would have to see some kind of change if people were going to start doing that en masse. I mean, in the modern world, we've got as much irrationality as we ever did. Even with information, sometimes, especially with information overload, people react to it by sort of retreating into their own point of view. So, I guess to keep it simple, I would prioritize energy. I wouldn't expect everybody to find a way to kind of hold hands. I mean, yes, prioritize compassion and rationality. That would be great to minimize conflict where possible, but I think conflict is always going to be inevitable. So part of the technological breakthroughs we'd be hoping for would be ones that could move at least some of humanity outside the sphere of conflict, get some people off planet, get some people into a sort of a post-biological state. These would be radical transhumanist situations that would at least change the risk landscape we're looking at. The last thing I'll say, though, is that just one thought I'd be having is that there are a few different cultures within transhumanism, of course, and we've been talking about the social question here, but a lot of transhumanists, I don't think, care about the social dimension at all. In fact, I think quite a few pointedly don't like it when people start banging on about the social question too much. And I worry that if people with that kind of mentality, if they were the only ones with access to the technology, that they would use it just to kind of pull up the drawbridge, basically, and say, well, I don't care what happens to the rest of you guys, I've got mine. And I think that could be a problem. And these don't necessarily need to be people who we think of as being a part of the transhumanist community right now, but they could be people who just have the resources to take advantage of the most powerful new technologies as they come online. And that's kind of, this is the worry when people talk about the 1% and that kind of thing. If you apply that to transhumanist technologies, the worry is that you've got an exploitative group of people who are going to use the technologies to better themselves and no one else. But that said, I like to think people are a bit more complex than that, and we see some amazing altruism from some of the most influential and well-resourced people in the tech sector. So I would hope to see that you'd see some people with a lot of resources acting in an altruistic way.
Well, my view is the world's getting worse and it's getting better. It's getting a lot worse and it's getting a lot better in parallel. And a small number of us, if we apply ourselves wisely, can help to tilt some of this projects in a much more positive direction.
Yeah. I would just say one last thing. Even if the whole of transhumanism is a sort of a hobbyist enclave, the most useful thing we could perhaps be doing then would be to promote a worldview that says that those people we know who are aware of our point of view, who do find themselves in very influential positions, should be pushing technologies that that reduce risk for as many people as possible and increase a better, improved life circumstances for as many people as possible. Just try to introduce the social question as a virtue. Anyway, I'll let somebody else think.
Yes, many thanks, Amon. Mark, final thoughts, any questions that you caught your eye that you'd like to comment on? We can't hear you. You're mute, sorry.
No, it's
yes,
okay.
Great.
Yeah, sorry. I tried to read the question, and so that a lot of them are talking about this question about energy and resources. I have to say that from my point of view, and as I have already said, I'm afraid it's just a short or middle term solution. Because I'm afraid that even if we are able in a few time, in a decade, I don't know, or 2 or 3, to use, for example, the energy and the resources which we can find in asteroids, for example, the question will be which countries, which companies will control those new sources of energy. And we will have some conflicts about the control of those new forms of energy. Or if we are looking for example, you know, in south of France, from some years, they are building an absolutely a new plant for nuclear fusion, and not fission, but nuclear fusion. And the goal is to have the first experiments, the starting point of the experiments in the 2080, something like that. And with the hope to be able to control a kind of energy which is the energy of the sun, in the inner part of the sun. So an energy which can be absolutely infinite. But the problem is, for the while, there will be a first plant, and this one will be maybe in south of France. If it works, what will happen with the possibilities to control this first plant? For the while is an international consortium which is building this plant, and you have America, Japan, even China, I mean, and Australia, Germany, Britain, France, etc. Just because for the while is it's at the step of the research, but at the moment which this experiment will be effective, what will happen? Sure, each of the partners will try to have its own plant, but we can, I think, in the logic we can expect that we will have the same problem and the same reaction with the nuclear plants. We can be 100% sure that we will have some military use of this new energy. The first, the 10 first nations, we will have the control of this energy. Will share this new technology freely for the rest of the world? I don't think so. Even if we have something like an unlimited source of energy, if we don't find solution for the problems I was speaking about before, I think that we won't find great solutions for conflicts. That's the way I think that.
So even an abundance is not going to stop us having conflict.
No,
as abundance of nuclear fusion.
Yeah, I think that you say that in a way that the level of resources and energy we have today compared with the level of energy and resources which was available just say 200 years, 2 centuries before, it's extremely larger. Even if we are reaching the top of or we have passed for petrol, for example, or for oil or gas, the top of our capacity of productions. But in general, or if you look at the 20th century, where this top point wasn't passed yet. And the people had the impression, or could have the impression, of an enormous richness in comparison with previous centuries. the fact that the material conditions was greatly better didn't at all prevent the wars of the 20th centuries.
So I think we need another conversation at another time on moral enhancement as a particular topic. I think we have laid out in this meeting the fact that technological advance by itself and more generation of more goods is unlikely to deal with conflict which arises all the time. So
that's
let's
my
come back to that. Yes. Andreas, I'll give you the final words. I mean, I noticed one of the questions from Landon Bennett, basically saying, look, maybe with all these problems, we should be figuring out plans for emergency survival locations such as camps, underground bunkers. You know, there's going to be war, there's going to be conflict. We're going to have to dig a rescue for ourselves. I mean, is that your view as you at the end of this discussion, or would you have some other advice to give to the NATO planners who are meeting in Wales this weekend? Next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the survival is needed to us anyway. You know, whether that would be military conflict, whether that would be asteroid, you know, volcano, or now Ebola, or any other nasty virus, which probably will come as, you know, we have more DIY biological kits and etc., more technologies, biotechnologies, bioengineered genetic viruses, and, you know, all these really scary things, which probably will come inevitably because, you know, we still got conflicts, different ideas, and, you know, technology is massively, you know, improving. So that's why I think it's extremely now important, you know, point in time to start thinking of a totally new paradigm of, you know, peace and conflict resolutions, etc., etc. And I would wish that, you know, NATO would start thinking along those lines, because they are still trying to do that conventional, classical, you know, war way sort of a thing. You know, while I do respect very much they're trying to avoid with sanctions so far, etc. And I hope nothing nasty will start after they have this discussion, and they will look at the innovations, and I will be proud of us, Lithuania and UK, and everyone being part of the NATO members. On energy topic I mentioned, and yeah, I think, you know, they just got me just an energy race, and it's not gonna resolve. I think I really support education and advocating secular society development massively. I think, you know, we're still not putting enough focus, even in the US, massively. I think there is still lots of religion-based influence paradigms. Then innovation in politics and overall in democracy, in peacemaking, we have to put, I don't know, SpaceX prize maybe again on peace innovation, like, you know, or on other innovations, beautiful innovations and beautiful topics discussed as technologists from technology perspective. And in this point, I agree very much that, you know, lots of futurists and transhumanists are unfortunately so much focused on technologies then that forget that the social aspect is in a way part of the technology, because, you know, as soon as you say I don't care about something, you know, it's a beginning of the conflict, you know, because others might care about that thing very much. So I think, you know, wherever futurists and humanists are thinking of something, they have to, you know, look at all aspects, and then that's the only way probably to avoid any conflicts. And, you know, we have interesting community like Amish in America. You know, they have this modest way of life, and I haven't had actually many issues with the developed sort of part of a civilization. And there might be maybe interesting examples how they are able to agree, you know, live together.
I think they have some conflicts as well.
Yeah,
and
and
they have some issues too.
Yeah, it's interesting also that, just to mention that, you know, Second World War, the very developed world lost many, you know, about what 5 times more people than the you know, maybe less developed world. So there are interesting thoughts actually, and scary things, and I think we just need to put some more focus.
So we are out of time. I think that although we haven't actually come up with a clear solution to the issues we've been discussing, it has been very well worthwhile exploring these things, because it's out of the exploration, then other people can look at what's being discussed and they will say, actually, you guys are missing an angle. But it's only when the challenge is laid clear that we have a hope of that innovation taking place. That is one of my lessons from the technology industry. You need to understand the challenge before you can expect the real innovations to arise. I did like the comment from Andreas there that perhaps we should be organizing an X Prize on peace innovation. And although I can't bankroll a £10 million X Prize on peace innovation, I think we should raise that question and maybe run it as a competition with less than £10 million prize, maybe no prize at all, but it is worth it for the sake of uncovering new approaches to resolving the conflicts which are all around us. And with that, I'm going to thank all the panelists for giving their time. I want to thank the audience members for submitting questions. It is an important topic, and I'm very glad for those who have taken the time to participate. Thanks, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.